Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Mind of Sai Marie. As you know, we are well on our way into May, which is officially observed as Mental Health Awareness Month, a time to increase understanding, reduce stigma, and highlight the value of support services. So, today we are joined by Eric Fisher, a Canadian certified counselor and award winning screenwriter and author of Buried Alive and the Martial Art of Recovery. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks, I. Thanks for having me on.
So, my first question, your book, Buried Alive, focuses on the near death experience of your father in rural Tennessee on February 12th, 2000. You use that scary event to show how challenging circumstances shed light on survival strategies. So, looking at your 15 years in treatment settings, was there a specific breaking point that made you realize recovery is just a survival mode?
When looking back, definitely not at the time. Like when it comes to like in the moment, yet looking back, I would say that recovery being another type of survival mode, working with a lot of different folks in recovery, we're just trying to go day by day, hour by hour. And just like when it comes to trauma, there can be a lot of triggers when it comes to like addiction recovery. Same thing with trauma recovery, just different types of triggers. And a person's just trying to each day work on particular things. And I think the big piece for me, looking at recovery being another part of survival mode or another version of survival mode, is that it is like that day by day. And for a while, it was kind of like, oh, well, someone will just snap and get it one day and then it's going to be all good. Well, it's a daily process. And I think just seeing it as a process was a big part for me with survival.
So, in that book, you examine the perspectives of all three men involved. What are the common unexamined sacrifices people make during a crisis?
I believe a big one is not being able to connect with services or the inability because of red tape to connect with services, which is often the case, and just being able to talk amongst one another in the community when something does happen that is traumatic and it might involve more than one person, which in this case, it was more than one person. I do believe that a big piece is just the inability, the difficulty, the challenge with being able to sit down and really process and debrief and discuss. Since in this situation with my dad, they didn't necessarily do that, and there could be different reasons for that. I did do a documentary a few years later to help those three men at least have each other's perspectives digitally. So I think that's just a big piece.
So, you also talk about resilience. How do we redefine it so it protects our internal terrain rather than depleting it?
Mm, yeah, that's a good question. Chris Johnstone, he's a gentleman that I came across when I was doing resiliency research, and Dr. Johnstone had these four different types of resilience, if you will, to make it more of an internal landscape, more introspection. And that's being able to bounce back, being able to bounce with, being able to bounce forward and bouncing outward. And I think being able to look at not just the bouncing back with what I'm facing, but also bouncing with, which is like more adaptive to situations I'm going through, bouncing forward with like transformative life experience where I learn, and then bouncing outward where I can spread that into different areas of my life, relationships, work, hobbies, different experiences. Just looking at it from those four perspectives of back with, forward, outward with resiliency, and also being able to examine the emotions, which is, I think is a really big piece when it comes to looking at it from an internal place instead of just trying to reach out. And for sure, a big part of resilience is reaching out for support. Some people think that resilience is just isolated to myself. A big part is the social connection, yet we also look at, okay, getting curious about what am I feeling? What am I thinking? What am I sensing?
So, when the world is loud, what is your personal ritual for finding that quiet center of clarity?
The world is loud, Si. What I like to do is get to a place that is a sanctuary for me, a place that's quiet. And a lot of times that can be in the bathtub. I mean, just being able just to relax in that way. Sensory experiences are important to me. I do like to go hiking as well out in the woods. There's something about the stillness amidst the trees that's quieting and very relaxing for me. And so I do believe getting out in nature and also different sensory experiences are important for me to quiet my mind, just to take some deep breaths, even in just a room, just to close eyes, take some deep breaths, center myself.
So, in the martial art of recovery, You use American Kinpo as a metaphorical approach to treating addiction, anxiety, and trauma. How does a person's unexamined past influence their current ability to make empowered choices?
Yeah, that's a big question. Well, I mean, just looking at the context of family upbringing, we often are given different messages from our upbringing, our family of origin with whoever we grew up with, parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents, even if we were adopted. And those messages may be positive or unfortunately they may be negative. And a lot of times that don't talk, don't trust, don't feel adage will come into play for someone. And oftentimes they're given these messages of, don't speak unless you're spoken to, or you're not going to be worthy unless you're perfect in achievements in your life, or, you're never going to amount to anything unless you're X, Y, or Z. And so I do believe that hearing this from different family members, especially parents, where attachment is very important to have a secure attachment with those parents. And sometimes when that's not available, maybe there's an anxious attachment with the parent, or the parent has an avoidant attachment where they have a hard time connecting with the child, and they give those different messages, either verbally, even with their actions, what they don't do or what they do. That can be really impactful for somebody. And then later in life, whether they know it or not, those messages will carry forward. And especially when it comes to the mother child relationship, with the attachment with the mother, that can be a big impact on a child for the good or for the not so good.
So, what is the biggest myth about strength you debunk most often in your practice?
A lot of people think that I have to continuously be strong. And, Sai, I have talked with a lot of folks where they tell me, you know what, Eric, I'm tired of having to act or look or be strong all the time. And I believe it's a misnomer. And I believe that society doesn't do people any favors when it comes to needing to continuously, consistently be strong in different facets of my life. That means that, okay, maybe there are some days where, you know what, with resiliency, with strength, maybe I'm having a really difficult day. And you know what, I need to take it easy. I need to do less than what I usually do. Maybe I need to reschedule something and take care of me, just looking at flexibility. And I do believe that it's a big misnomer. It's a big negative stereotype to believe that someone has to be strong all the time when it comes to facing resiliency. I can bend like a blade of grass, or I can break through a wall when it comes to resiliency. And sometimes it's not breaking through that wall, it's bending like a blade of grass and being flexible and malleable and meeting the circumstances where I'm at emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and to go from there for what's best for me.
When someone has survived a hard season, how do they reclaim an identity not tied to that?
Yeah, that's another big question. How does someone reclaim their identity not tied to the trauma when there is a hard season? I would say that with that, it's simply, well, not simply, but it's being curious about different possibilities. Self identity has so many different facets. A lot of that we grab from culture, we grab that from family upbringing, we grab that from friendships, from relationships, from her work. Yeah, so I do believe that for us, it's getting curious about, okay, I've been through something traumatic. I'm feeling disconnected from myself. So can I be curious about what I'm feeling in this particular situation? Can I be curious about what I'm sensing? Can I be curious about this feedback that was given to me from a friend and what that means to me? I believe a big piece is imagination when it comes to reclaiming a self identity, being imaginative to the point where I could look at the different possibilities. I can imagine something different. And by being curious, I have more propensity to be imaginative for me when it comes to my mental health, emotionally, with relationships, spiritually, what my needs, my values, my meaning and purpose, with all those different ones, being curious and looking at things around me and things that are happening inside me, being mindful of what's going on in the present moment and throughout the day, looking at something that happened with someone else that maybe I know, like, oh wow, okay, interesting. And like, how could that relate to me? Or this happened. I was feeling this. What's going on there? I do believe just starting at that bedrock principle curiosity. So I can look at those different facets and start to bridge the gap with my self identity once again. And that's not going to be one week and I'm back to where I'd like to be with self identity. For a lot of us, that's an ongoing process. That's not going to stop anytime soon, whether there's a trauma or not. we're constantly trying to understand ourselves a lot more, and that includes curiosity even without a traumatic event.
How do you encourage someone to look at the dirt they've been avoiding without them feeling overwhelmed?
I think that goes back to curiosity too, but I think it also goes back to boundaries as well, going back to having limits, having preferences. So when I am under the dirt and maybe I'm feeling shame, maybe I'm feeling guilt about something, perhaps I went through a situation that was really overwhelming. Perhaps I need to put some boundaries in place for myself, whether that's a intellectual boundary where somebody wants to bring up a topic, maybe it's religious or political or it's something that I don't really wanna talk about in depth, and it's like, "No, let me just give me some space with that. I'd rather not talk about that right now. Just give me a little bit. I'll come back when I'm ready to talk about that, if ever." So boundaries are flexible, they can change. They could be a spiritual boundary, again, when it comes to different spiritual pieces. Maybe someone's trying to push their values on me, and I don't really agree with certain values, and so it's like, "Hey, I'm gonna take some space there from this person today." Or quite restricted. Could be an emotional boundary. Someone brings up something that stirs within me and I'm feeling unsafe. It's like, okay, I'm going to pull back there for myself. Boundaries are set by me and for me. They're not to control someone else. I do believe that's a big piece when it comes to that part there.
So, what is the mechanical difference between a choice of habit and a choice of intent?
Well, when it comes to a choice of habit, habits are by definition quite automatic. We go from a thought to an action without considering a lot about our beliefs or perhaps how that may impact us, whether that's for the positive or not so much. So I believe for a habit, there's not often a lot of space for intention, for intentionality, which actually is a factor when it comes to resilience. I can look at my principles and have those on the back end as far as my choices are concerned. Does this line up with my principles? Does this action line up with my values? And then go from there. And not to say that habits can't line up with what I value or my principles, yet we see just from experience that principles and values are a lot more so embedded when we have intentionality, when we're intentional, when we're more mindful. And that's another piece with having habits is there's not a lot of mindfulness. It's usually very much, one, two, three really quickly. When it comes to looking at intentionality, there often is a mindfulness component where I'm more so in the present moment. I'm not, you know, more future focused, which is often with the habit. Like, what am I going to get? What's the reward? What's the anticipatory reward? What am I going to get from this? So it's delaying that gratification to the point where I can be intentional, take the steps, bring in my values, my principles, and to go from there and to have that space between the two. And we see that with addiction. We see that with wanting to even want to try to make amends really quickly. It can seem quite habitual, like just to, jump the gun with however, even with making amends to someone, we can be intentional. We can take our time. We can look at the pros and cons, see what's going on within ourselves, which values is that attached to for making those amends and go from there. And so those are a few of the differences, I think, between habits and also intention.
So, you are a master practitioner of ART and EMDR, which is helping people process trauma while navigating your own high level career. How has moving from the South to Calgary helped shape your view on authentic self expression?
Yeah. Well, I went from Mississippi to New Zealand for 15 months. And then from New Zealand, I went to Calgary. And I think just being able to, when it comes to authentic self expression, being able to go to these different areas, explore the culture, meet people, see different perspectives, different ways of living, especially in New Zealand, where the whole idea is over there, when they ask, how are you doing? It's pretty like, they're not, they also will ask, how, like, they don't usually ask, like, what do you do for work? When they ask, what do you do? They're asking more so like, what do you enjoy? What is your passions, your hobbies? What gives you that spark? And I really took that away from that experience coming from the US where when someone asks, what do you do? It's usually, what do you do for work? And it actually just happened just the other day. I was at a function at the church I attend, and I met someone there, and they asked, "What do you do?" And he was asking, "Yeah, what do you do for work?" Within 30 seconds of meeting me, and no harm, no foul. That's just the way it goes in the culture here. So I think that just looking at the importance of hobbies and the importance of different pastimes and the importance of just different what things that give spark, that give rejuvenation, that give that ability to connect with myself. I took that from the experience of moving and even just the transition up here and definitely doing one piece at a time uh, was a big part there. And, I do find even inspiration from being in a place so close to the mountains here and where I'm from in Tennessee. They call them mountains, but they're just big hills. And up here, there actually is real mountains, and it's just amazing to go out there. It's amazing to go hiking out there. It's just amazing to be out in the woods there. So that's, yeah.
A little side note, I actually lived in Tennessee between Middle and East Tennessee for about 15 years of my life despite being from the Pacific Northwest, so I totally understand.
Awesome. That's all. That's great. Was it near Nashville or?
I lived between well, when I first moved there, I moved from Eugene, Oregon to Nashville, Tennessee, and we lived in Nashville for a few months before my mom moved south, to Spring Hill and Columbia. I lived between Franklin, Spring Hill, Columbia for a very long time. And then I moved to East Tennessee. That was probably about 2008. I lived there for about a year and a half before I moved to Southern Alabama, and I lived on the Florida and Alabama border for about 5 years before I returned home to Oregon, and I'm not leaving.
Awesome. Well, yeah, you definitely got your round of different cities and different parts of the state when you were there.
Yes, I got to experience a lot of different things, and, so I definitely relate to that experience that you had other than I haven't been out of the country, but it is a goal. I'll do it one day. So back to my next question. For someone who feels they have lost their voice, what is the very first step towards finding it?
Have compassion for yourself. I'll just keep it there. Have compassion for yourself. Have some self compassion. If you don't know the steps for that, then research it. Ask people that have maybe been through a similar experience where they lost their voice. A lot of times when someone feels like they've lost their voice, there can be imposter syndrome involved. And so can we look at if that's there, can we look at, okay, what are the core beliefs that are pushing this imposter syndrome and have compassion on myself? I was recently doing a course with this neurologist and he mentioned something that Dr. Rosenbaum that I thought was really interesting. And people often think they have to get self compassion from inside themselves. Yet he mentioned, you know what, that can be really difficult for a lot of us. So, hey, can I find something or someone else that I can draw that self compassion from? And for a lot of people, that could be God. For people, that could be something else. It could be someone else that was really important to me in my life. Yet having some type of meditative practice, some type of ritual to help me cultivate that self compassion, bring in that compassion from someone giving me that compassion for me. And I thought that was a really interesting way to look at it. All of us will lose our voice. Well, some of us literally, some of us metaphorically, as far as going through different things. A lot of times it's because of what someone else has said or done toward us. And so another piece is just not allowing someone else to edit my reality for what is true for me, what's beneficial for me. And I wish that was an original concept, but that comes from, let's see, it's a book, 12 Stupid Things That Mess Up Recovery by Dr. Alan Berger. So don't let someone else edit your reality and give yourself some compassion. Do things that are self care focused for you, and that can help with cultivating compassion as well.
Absolutely agree with that. So, how do we prepare our internal terrain before the crisis actually hits?
So are you asking like prepare ourselves for the terrain as far as preventative measures?
Well, yeah, and I think that especially people that have already been through a crisis and they're going through healing, something that I think is maybe undershadowed and needs to be highlighted with it being mental health month is that there's going to be a crisis again. And what can you do, especially for people like I have CPTSD. So if you know that that's going to happen, that can scare you and be intimidating. So how can we help get ourselves, kind of prepared for that to happen so that we don't kind of freak out, for lack of a better way of putting it?
I hear you. I hear you. So there's not a major freak out. There's not a major, I guess to use the technical jargon term from EMDR, a abreaction in my body.
Yes.
So I would say when I work with folks that have been through major trauma, and yes, CPTSD has been one of the diagnoses for sure. And yes, that usually involves a lot of multiple ongoing childhood events that have been traumatic. We work on stabilization exercises. We work on different guided visualizations. And not to say that's going to be a cure, yet doing those when someone is actually not hyper aroused, helping them come to a place where they're in that optimal zone of arousal and being able to do these practices to help them stay there. Yet also, when something does go awry, there is a trigger. It's like, "Oh, yes, I've kind of done my muscle building, so to speak, with these different exercises, and I can go back to these, because they're kind of reflexive at this point. And that could be autogenic training, that could be a self compassion or guided meditation or a loving kindness meditation or uh, just some power breath, ocean breath, just different breathing exercises, lots of different possibilities there. It's just being able to have a repertoire. You don't have to do them maybe every day, just getting a routine set in stone and just making sure that you're surrounding yourselves with those healthy supports that you can call on when something does come up because picking up that 1,000-pound phone, if it's never picked up that much, can be difficult. So that could be another part with this. And no one has that easy, by the way. Like no one's going to be perfect at picking up the phone. But if you have that one person and you can get to that place where you can get a call in or at least a voicemailing and they can get you a call back.
Right. Yeah, those coping skills are definitely crucial. I can attest to that. And grounding is something that has helped me a lot. Those are the things I was hoping we could talk a little bit about. So thank you for that. Far as you're concerned, being a black belt and a counselor has got to be a lot to juggle on one plate. How do you personally navigate the overload?
Grounding. Yes, grounding would be one, and that could be mindful walking outside. I do like to I did exercise today. I did like 40 minutes of, it was called pull strength with this kind of a video workout program on the Beachbody app. So that definitely worked me today. I'm not a spring chicken anymore. So, I'm 40 plus now. So it definitely works me, but I appreciate how I feel afterwards. I had a bath after that too. So, yeah, talking about those things I talked about a moment ago, but I do find that you know, spirituality is important for me too. I do attend church, part of a prayer group at church, and we meet at 6 in the morning on Tuesday mornings, and it's a brutal time to get up and go. Yet I do enjoy after it's over, but not getting there. But it's really good. I sit next to someone the man's been in recovery for over 40 years, and he's very much vocal about that. Everyone knows, and he wears that as an emblem for him, a victory. So just being around those type of people that are really inspirational for sure is a part of it too. So I would say, so yeah, exercise, mindfulness, eating well, trying to get as best sleep as I can. Super overrated. There's not really a mental health concern where sleep is not impacted. So I would say those are my big parts there.
Finally, what fundamental shift in perspective is needed to break systemic barriers to care?
I work with, I contract with a, it's a nonprofit organization in Airdrie. I'll just give a shout out to them, and it goes into the question here. They're called the Thumbs Up Foundation, and Kim and Kim Titus, they were able to start this organization that was really engineered mainly because they lost one of their sons to suicide. He had his thumbs up in a lot of his photos, hence the Thumbs Up Foundation being engraved as the name. And a big part of their work is cutting through the red tape of systematic care. And what we've been able to do through that is comprehensive treatment evaluations that have been, we get funding, so free of charge for the person. And that includes being able to meet with a medical doctor. That includes having a sober second review of that particular comprehensive treatment evaluation by another practitioner and giving them an allotment of sessions. And so cutting through the red tape when it comes to bringing them all these different practitioners without policies or waiting times, which can be a big hassle here in Canada, or just telling someone, yeah, you're not a good fit for us. Like we're at least giving someone a chance to get the support that they need. And that's been an amazing experience because that's comprehensive treatment evaluation is quite extensive. And they also have a kind of like a peer support manager as well. It's part of the team that checks in with them between our sessions. And so there's multiple people that are in this person's wheelhouse, this person's their treatment tribe really, and they get the benefit of everyone's different perspectives. And we also have third parties available. We even have someone that does intergenerational trauma treatment. Her name is Carrie Dunlop. I want to, shout out to Carrie. She's been great. She was actually mentored by the author of It Didn't Start With Me. If you've ever heard of that book, Mark Wallen, she was actually mentored by Mark Wallen. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, we just have different people like that we can refer to in the case that they need additional support. And so it's not just me that's a clinician. We have two other clinicians that are part of that team. And we've been able to do an integrated recovery program. We did a group therapy program. So it's been amazing to be able to give a person the opportunity to have multiple treatment providers assigned to them, and we actually all know each other. And I think that's one of the biggest pieces is that we all know each other. We've all met each other face to face, which is a huge part when it comes to this care.
I agree with that. Well, Eric, thank you for joining us today and for the work you do at Recovery Arts Counseling. Everyone, be sure to check out Eric's work. I will have a link in the show description. As always, this has been the Mind of Sai Marie. Remember, the mind is the most important story that we'll ever tell.